For many years, people on Earth believed they were alone in the universe, or at least too far away from anyone else to ever make real friends beyond their own solar system. But everything changed the day Earth made contact with the people of Valora. The first meetings were full of confusion and questions, but the connection grew stronger with time. Both sides were curious, respectful, and eager to learn. It was the kind of friendship that made both worlds feel a little less lonely. Valor was a peaceful planet with bright landscapes and a strong sense of unity among its people. They valued knowledge, cooperation, and fairness. When Earth's explorers visited for the first time, they were surprised at how naturally both worlds understood each other. Even though they were different species, their hopes were strangely similar. Both wanted safety, better lives, shared discoveries, and a future that felt worth working for. The friendship soon turned into a proper alliance. There were exchange programs, joint missions, cultural visits, and even trade agreements that helped both sides grow. Young people from Earth dreamed of seeing Valora's glowing forests. Valoran scientists visited Earth's universities to teach new energy methods. Bit by bit, this relationship became an example for the entire galaxy, but not everyone was happy about it. The Galaxy Council, a huge political body controlling many planets, watched this growing bond with quiet discomfort. On the outside, the Council pretended to support peace and freedom. But inside the large chamber halls, many members whispered that Earth and Valora together were becoming too strong, too united, or too independent. Some of them feared losing control over trade, influence, or decisions that shaped the galaxy. They preferred things to remain predictable, and this new alliance was anything but predictable. Even though Earth did nothing wrong, even though Valora was peaceful, the Council started treating them both like troublemakers. Their representatives would sometimes make comments that didn't sound openly hostile, but carried a strange sharpness. We hope Earth remembers its place in the galactic structure. Valora should consider the consequences of certain partnerships. These kinds of remarks were meant to sound polite, but everybody understood the hidden warning beneath. Still, Earth and Valora ignored the tension. They believed that good friendships were worth protecting, no matter who disliked it. Earth's ambassador often said that peace was never a problem, only ego was. And Valora always encouraged patience, reminding Earth that progress often makes some people uncomfortable at first. The alliance was built on trust, not politics, so they stayed focused on what they stood for. For normal people across both worlds, life felt brighter. They exchanged stories, discovered each other's traditions, and even began working on joint exploration missions. The dream was to map uncharted regions of the galaxy together and build stations where their people could live side by side. One of the biggest achievements was a shared research center in deep space. Scientists from both planets worked there, developing technology that could produce clean energy, faster communication signals, and safer travel routes. The facility became a symbol of unity. Anyone who visited came back talking about how hopeful the atmosphere was inside. Even traders and travelers benefited. Earth started receiving unique minerals from Valora that made manufacturing easier. Valora began using Earth's farming techniques to solve food shortages in smaller colonies. It was a give-and-take relationship, not one dominating the other. And because the two planets trusted each other, things moved smoothly. But the Galaxy Council failed to see any of the good. Instead, they viewed the alliance through a lens of fear. They believed that if Earth and Valora kept growing together, other planets might join them. And if that happened, the Council's authority would weaken. The idea terrified them more than any outside threat. Meetings became colder. Council reports became harsher. Some members began pushing for new rules that made it harder for Earth and Valora to collaborate freely. Whenever Earth questioned those rules, they were told it was for balance. Whenever Valora protested, they were told it was for security. No one ever explained what those words really meant. Earth's ambassador, a calm and observant individual, felt the shift more deeply than anyone else. They attended every council session, listened to every speech, and studied every small change in tone. Something wasn't right. The ambassador couldn't prove anything, but they sensed the council was drifting away from honest politics and toward something darker, something driven by insecurity and power. The ambassador tried to warn Earth's leaders, explaining how the council felt threatened, how their patience seemed to be running thin, and how their behavior suggested something brewing underneath. But the leaders believed the council would never act rashly. After all, they were supposed to protect peace. They were created after centuries of conflicts to prevent unnecessary wars. Why would they attack anyone? Why would they harm Valora, a planet known for its calm nature? So Earth continued to trust the system, believing the council would eventually adjust, accept the new alliance, and move on. The ambassador tried to stay hopeful too, though deep inside, they couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling. Sometimes, when they walked out of the council chamber, they felt like eyes were following them, not in a friendly way, but in a way that said, "You are becoming a problem." Meanwhile, Valora noticed strange behavior as well. Their trade permits were processed slower. Their requests for joint missions were delayed. Their messages to certain council departments went unanswered. It was as if someone was quietly building walls around them, hoping they wouldn't notice. Valora mentioned these concerns to Earth, and both decided to stay cautious but calm. They agreed to observe for a while longer, just to understand what was truly happening. But outside of political halls, life went on. People from both worlds continued to meet, work, and share dreams. No one at the ground level suspected that anything serious was about to happen. How could they? The future looked too promising, too full of potential discoveries. Many believed the alliance would inspire others. There were even early discussions about forming a group of peaceful planets focused on cooperation, rather than controlling each other. If only they knew how. Closely, the council was watching those talks. There was one moment, a small one, that would later feel like a warning sign. At the research center in deep space, a group of Valoran engineers reported that a council official made an unexpected visit. Instead of complimenting their work, the official asked questions like, "Why are Earth and Valora so close? And what are your long-term plans?" The tone wasn't curious, it was suspicious. When the engineers explained everything openly, the official simply nodded and left without saying anything encouraging. One of the engineers shared the moment with colleagues from Earth, joking that the official seemed worried for no reason. Both sides laughed it off. They thought it was just a grumpy visitor. But the truth was far more serious. In the council's central offices, a small but influential group had started meeting privately. Their discussion was always the same. Earth and Valora were becoming too united. They said the alliance was turning into a threat to political balance. They insisted something must be done before the partnership attracted more planets. The ambassador sensed these secret tensions, but had nothing concrete to show Earth's leaders. Without evidence, it sounded like speculation. So the warnings remained quiet thoughts in the ambassador's mind, thoughts that kept repeating every time they stepped into the council corridors. Still, Earth and Valora held on to hope. They believed that peace was stronger than suspicion. They believed that transparency and honesty could fix any misunderstanding. And they believed that the council, no matter how frustrated, would never harm its own members. But the universe does not always follow belief. Sometimes warnings come soft and subtle, and by the time anyone notices, the storm has already begun forming in places no one can see. Back on Earth, people prepared for another joint exploration mission with Valora, excited to map new star systems. Valoran families made plans to visit Earth for the next cultural exchange event. Everything looked normal. The days passed quietly, almost too quietly. No one realized that these calm days were the final ones, before a moment that would change every corner of the galaxy. For now, Earth and Valora stood proudly together, two worlds connected by trust. They did not know that the Council had already started moving pieces behind closed doors. They did not know their alliance was about to be tested in a way no one could imagine. And they certainly did not know that the silence gathering around Valora would soon become the darkest signal of all. The first signs that something was wrong came slowly, almost like a whisper. At first, Earth's monitoring stations noticed a faint disruption in the communications from Valora. Messages that were normally clear and immediate began to arrive late or with missing parts. Engineers tried to fix it, assuming it was a technical problem, a glitch in the signal caused by distance or interference from nearby stars. They ran tests, checked every transmission relay, and even sent backup messages, but nothing seemed to improve the situation. At the same time, Valoran observers noticed something strange near the edges of their planetary system. Small energy bursts flickered in areas where no natural phenomena should exist. Valoran scientists were curious, but not alarmed. Space often had unusual activity. Yet, when they shared their findings with Earth, a quiet unease settled over both sides. It was as if the universe itself was signaling that something had changed. One morning, the first real alarm arrived. A routine message from a Valoran space outpost was only partially delivered. Most of it was garbled, but a few words came through clearly. Unexpected? Danger. Cannot hold. Help. The message ended abruptly, cutting off in the middle of a sentence. Engineers on Earth stared at the screen in disbelief. They tried to respond, but every attempt to connect to the outpost failed. At first, Earth's leaders hesitated to act. They hoped it was an accident, a technical failure, or perhaps a local storm interfering with communications. But soon, more reports came in. Satellites detected unusual energy waves sweeping across Valoran territory, leading behind strange, smoky trails. Patrol ships approaching the system reported nothing like they had ever seen before. Some described clouds of light that seemed to shimmer unnaturally, as if space itself had been disturbed. Then the first survivors arrived. They were small shuttles from distant colonies near Valora, carrying people who had managed to escape the chaos. Their faces were pale and their voices were trembling. They spoke in fragments, as if the words themselves were too heavy to hold together. We don't know. It came so fast. The Council, they... The sentence broke, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Earth's leaders began to realize the unthinkable. Something had happened to Valora, and it was no accident. The outposts, the colonies, even the central cities, everything had been attacked, targeted, and destroyed. The word that finally passed through whispers and channels was horrifying. The Galaxy Council itself had been involved, that it was almost impossible to comprehend. The Council was supposed to maintain order, protect planets, and prevent conflicts. They were not supposed to attack peaceful allies. But the evidence kept coming. Survivors described strange ships moving with precise coordination, ships that matched the Council's designs and identification codes. Intercepted communications revealed orders that left no doubt. This was a deliberate action, planned in advance, executed with efficiency and secrecy. The mood on Earth changed instantly. Fear and anger filled the air. People who had always believed the Council to be fair now questioned everything they had been told about the galaxy's governing body. For decades, Earth had trusted that the Council's decisions were made in the interest of peace. Now, that trust felt shattered. Every day brought more pieces of the horrifying puzzle. Distress signals from Valora, though weak and fragmented, began to tell the story of a planet under siege. Families separated, children stranded, scientists trying to protect their research, all left vulnerable to forces that should never have existed in the first place. The messages were often incomplete, but the tone was clear. Those responsible had no concern for lives, only for control. The ambassador who had warned Earth about the Council's growing fear of the Alliance felt a deep sense of guilt. They had tried to prepare their leaders to show that this threat was real, but warnings without evidence had sounded like exaggeration. Now, with Valora in ruins, every moment of hesitation felt like a failure. The ambassador spent long hours going through every piece of data, every intercepted message, trying to understand how such a betrayal could happen. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens watched the news in horror. Families huddled together, listening to updates from survivors and recordings that had somehow made their way to Earth. People who had laughed about the distant world of Valora now cried for it. Teachers told children stories about bravery and resilience, but even their voices shook when they mentioned the attacks. The sense of unity that had existed between Earth and Valora now carried a new urgency. This was no longer just friendship, it was survival. Amidst the chaos, Earth's leaders knew they had to act carefully. They could not rush into revenge without understanding the full situation. The Council was powerful, controlling fleets, resources, and influence across multiple systems. A hasty response could lead to more destruction. Yet doing nothing felt impossible. Every day Valora remained silent was a day too long. Intelligence teams worked around the clock. Using hidden satellites, deep space probes, and advanced algorithms, they tried to trace the origin of the attacks. Each piece of information was painstakingly analyzed. Every energy spike, every intercepted signal, every fragment of a survivor's story was cross-referenced. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The attacks were not random. They were carefully planned, coordinated, and executed with the precision of a governing authority rather than rogue actors. The more Earth learned, the angrier people became. Politicians, scientists, and even ordinary citizens began to demand accountability. Why would the Council betray a peaceful ally? They asked. What kind of leadership destroys trust instead of protecting it? These questions were repeated in every city, every communication channel, every corner of the planet. The shock was universal. In the middle of this turmoil, Earth's commanders faced difficult decisions. Should they send ships to Valora to investigate further? Should they prepare a defense fleet in case the Council turned its attention toward Earth next? And most importantly, how could they save the survivors who were still stranded in dangerous areas? Each choice carried immense risk, but hesitation was no longer an option. As the first rescue teams were prepared, more distress signals arrived. They were faint, barely understandable, but they all carried the same urgent message. Help. Valora. Urgent. Every signal was a reminder that real people, real families, and real children were in danger. The urgency of the situation pushed Earth's leaders to act with precision and care. Behind the scenes, analysts began to uncover the Council's motives. Through hidden recordings, intercepted communications, and the few surviving messages from Valoran leaders, it became clear that a faction within the Council had decided that Earth and Valora's growing alliance was a threat. They were afraid that if other planets saw two worlds working together peacefully, it could inspire independence, collaboration, and resistance to control. The Council faction believed that erasing Valora would send a message to everyone else. Do not challenge authority. This revelation was almost unbearable. People who had always believed in the ideals of cooperation and fairness now saw the darkest side of politics. The betrayal was not personal, it was calculated. It was a decision made in cold rooms, far away from the lives it would destroy. And yet the victims were ordinary families, scientists, children, and dreamers, just like those on Earth. Earth's response was measured but firm. Rescue ships were sent to salvage what they could, evacuating survivors and providing aid wherever possible. Each mission was dangerous. The remnants of the Council's forces were still present in the area, and the energy anomalies made navigation risky. Yet, Earth's crews remained determined. They moved with a mix of courage, skill, and compassion. Every life saved felt like a victory. Every family reunited was a small light in the shadow that had fallen over Valoran as the rescue efforts continued. Earth's leaders realized that this event would change everything. The alliance with Valoran had been one of hope and mutual respect. Now, it was also a symbol of resilience and justice. Citizens began to understand that sometimes trust must be protected, even in the face of betrayal. Every broadcast from the survivors, every story shared on Earth, strengthened the resolve to stand for what was right. And yet the question remained, what would happen next? The Council had already shown its willingness to destroy a planet for fear of losing control. Could Earth prevent a similar tragedy from happening to themselves or other peaceful worlds? The answer was not simple, but one thing was clear. Valora's silence would not be ignored, and their suffering would not be forgotten. For now, Earth focused on what it could do. They prepared rescue operations, documented every piece of evidence, and began gathering intelligence on the Council's movements. Citizens across the planet contributed in small ways, sharing information, supporting relief efforts, and keeping the stories of Valora alive. Everyone understood that this was not just a political crisis. It was a human one. Families were at stake, and history was being written in real time. Even in the darkest moments, hope flickered. Survivors shared stories of courage, of neighbors helping each other escape, of engineers who refused to leave their research until they secured vital resources. Children who had seen their homes destroyed clung to the small acts of kindness that made life worth living. These stories reminded everyone on Earth why the Alliance had mattered, and why standing up for Valora was more than just a duty, it was a responsibility to humanity itself. The day ended with Earth receiving a single, clear signal from a Valoran survivor. It was brief, but its meaning was undeniable. We are here. We are not forgotten. Thank you. That message became a rallying cry, a symbol that even in the face of betrayal and destruction, the bond between the two worlds was not broken. And so, Earth began to prepare for the next steps, determined to uncover the full truth, protect the remaining survivors, and ensure that the events that had silenced Valora would never be repeated. The universe had shown its darkest side, but it had also shown the strength, resilience, and courage of those who refused to turn away. The story of Valora was far from over. It had only just begun to reveal the challenges, the bravery, and the choices that would shape the future of the galaxy. And Earth, standing at the threshold of this new reality, understood that the coming days would require courage, unlike anything they had faced before. The first step for Earth was to understand the full scope of what had happened to Valora. Rescue efforts were underway, but they could only cover so much. Teams of scientists, engineers, and medics worked tirelessly, racing against time to reach survivors, restore communications, and secure resources that could help the displaced people. Every shuttle, every crew, every mission was a careful balance between speed and safety. No one wanted to risk more lives, but every delay could mean someone left behind as rescue operations continued. Earth's leaders realized they needed more than just immediate help. They needed the truth. How could such a peaceful planet be attacked? Who within the Galaxy Council had made such a decision? Why would anyone destroy lives when there were diplomatic solutions available? These questions kept officials awake at night. They also kept the ambassador awake, revisiting every warning that had once seemed speculative. Now, each concern felt like a confirmation of everything they had feared. Intelligence teams went to work immediately. They intercepted Council transmissions, analyzed patterns in the attacks, and searched for anomalies in the energy signatures that had caused the destruction. Each discovery painted a clearer picture. The attacks had been planned months in advance, coordinated to hit every strategic location at once. Valara's defenses had been bypassed not by chance, but by knowledge of exactly where to strike. It was deliberate, calculated, and chilling. Survivors from Valora became crucial to understanding the attack. Many of them had witnessed decisions being made in their own cities, decisions that should never have involved harming innocent people. They described how local officials had been confronted by armed forces that identified themselves as Council units. They spoke of the shock, confusion, and helplessness that came from seeing familiar faces of authority carrying out orders to destroy rather than protect. Every story added weight to the evidence. Every memory shared became a thread in the tapestry of betrayal. For ordinary citizens on Earth, hearing these accounts was heartbreaking. Families gathered around screens to watch interviews, to listen to survivors tell their stories. People cried together, felt anger together, and felt a sense of responsibility unlike anything they had known. It was one thing to hear of tragedy in a distant world. It was another to understand that it had been caused by those entrusted with safety. Amidst this turmoil, Earth's leaders faced difficult questions. Could they trust any part of the Galaxy Council? Could they believe that other planets would support justice? And perhaps most importantly, what was their responsibility toward Valora now? The answers were not simple, but hesitation was no longer an option. Action was needed, but it had to be measured, precise, and guided by principle rather than anger. The ambassador convened a special council meeting. Experts from multiple fields, diplomacy, military strategy, ethics, and intelligence, came together to discuss the next steps. The focus was not revenge but truth. They wanted to ensure that the entire galaxy understood the full story, that Valora's suffering was not hidden, and that those responsible were held accountable. Plans began to take shape. First, rescue teams would continue evacuations, securing any survivors and helping them find safe havens. Simultaneously, intelligence operatives would gather as much information as possible about the Council's actions, documenting every order, every communication, every piece of evidence that proved the attacks were deliberate. Earth wanted proof, not speculation, because the galaxy needed to see the facts before they could act. The technical challenges were immense. Council technology was advanced and sophisticated, designed to monitor and control entire systems. Earth had to find ways to intercept transmissions without being detected, to gather information without triggering further conflict, and to coordinate teams across thousands of light years. It was a test of skill, patience, and ingenuity. Engineers and scientists worked together like never before. They developed specialized probes to move silently through space, instruments to detect hidden signals, and algorithms to analyze patterns too complex for humans to see on their own. Each success brought hope. Each failure taught a lesson. People on Earth began to understand the enormous effort required to uncover the truth in a universe that seemed intent on hiding it. At the same time, human compassion became central to the effort. Every rescue mission focused not only on bringing survivors to safety, but also on preserving dignity and providing comfort. Teams brought food, water, and medical aid. They listened to stories, offered reassurance, and reminded survivors that they were not alone. Small gestures, holding a frightened hand, sharing words of encouragement, helping a child laugh again, became as important as any technical solution. The ambassador played a unique role. They traveled between Earth and temporary command centers, coordinating with both rescue and intelligence teams. They met with survivors personally, listening to every detail, taking notes, and ensuring that no story was overlooked. Their calm presence helped maintain order during chaos. People trusted them, not because of authority, but because they genuinely cared. Meanwhile, analysts began to piece together the Council's motives. Records showed that a faction within the Council had grown increasingly concerned about the alliance between Earth and Valora. Their fear was not hidden. They had discussed it openly in private sessions. They believed that two united planets could inspire others to resist centralized control, to question authority, and to seek independence. And in their fear, they concluded that erasing Valora would send a warning to every other world. Cooperation without permission was dangerous. It was difficult for everyone involved to grasp. The Council's logic seemed twisted, but the evidence was undeniable. Decisions made far away in quiet chambers had caused real suffering. People who had spent their lives believing in fairness, justice, and reason now faced the bitter reality that power often ignored humanity. Earth's leaders realized that sharing this information was as important as any rescue operation. The galaxy needed to understand the Council's betrayal, not through rumors or speculation, but through undeniable proof. Evidence from survivors, intercepted transmissions, and analytical reports would be compiled into a comprehensive dossier. Every fact would be verified. Every story would be included. Transparency was the goal, because truth was the most powerful tool they had at the same time. Earth could not act recklessly. The Council controlled vast fleets and resources. A direct attack without preparation could escalate the situation into a broader conflict. Military strategists worked alongside diplomats to develop plans that were both defensive and strategic. They focused on protecting Earth while preparing for the possibility of future confrontations, ensuring that any action taken would be measured, precise, and principled. Throughout all this, ordinary people on Earth played a crucial role. Scientists, engineers, medics, volunteers, and students contributed however they could. Some designed equipment for rescue missions. Some translated messages from Valora. Some helped organize supplies and temporary housing for survivors. Every small act was part of a larger effort, and every individual contribution reminded everyone that human compassion could thrive even in the darkest times. The survivors themselves were remarkable. Despite everything they had endured, they helped one another, cared for the injured, and maintained hope. Their courage inspired everyone working on Earth's side. Families reunited after days of separation. Children smiled again for the first time, and communities began to rebuild slowly, even in temporary shelters. These moments reminded everyone why the alliance had mattered in the first place. As evidence of the Council's actions became undeniable. A sense of purpose grew on Earth. This was not just about Valora anymore. It was about justice, accountability, and the belief that trust and compassion could never be broken, even when powerful forces tried to destroy them. Leaders began to speak publicly about the events, sharing verified reports with citizens and allies. The message was clear. The truth would be known, and those responsible would face the consequences. Every broadcast, every report, every story from survivors strengthened resolve. People understood that while the Council had tried to destroy Valora, it had also awakened something else, a commitment across Earth and its allies to never let such an injustice go unanswered. This commitment was not driven by revenge, but by the principle that no world should be threatened simply for wanting to work together peacefully. Even in the midst of tragedy, hope persisted. Plans for reconstruction and recovery were already underway. New settlements were prepared for Valoran survivors. Relief teams worked to provide food, medicine, and shelter. Education programs were set up for children who had lost their schools. Every small action reminded people that life could continue, that trust could be rebuilt, and that unity could overcome betrayal. The ambassador reflected on everything they had learned. The Council had acted out of fear, but fear alone could not justify the suffering it caused. Every decision, every piece of evidence, every survivor's story reinforced the importance of standing up for what was right. For the first time, the ambassador realized that their role was not only about diplomacy, but also about bearing witness, documenting truth, and ensuring that history remembered both the tragedy and the courage that followed. As Part 3 of this story closes, Earth faces a critical moment. Rescue missions continue, evidence is gathered, and the bond between Earth and Valora strengthens even in adversity. The situation is complex, dangerous, and emotionally challenging. But one thing is certain: the world has seen the Council's betrayal, and the response will not be forgotten. Every life saved, every story told, and every act of compassion sets the stage for what comes next, a stage where courage, justice, and resilience will shape the destiny of both worlds. The weeks after the attacks on Valora were some of the most challenging Earth had ever faced. While rescue teams continued to bring survivors to safety and provide medical care, the planet as a whole had to come to terms with the betrayal of the Galaxy Council. Citizens, leaders, scientists, and diplomats all realized that nothing could ever make this kind of event feel normal again. The trust they had placed in the Council was shattered, and the future suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. Even in the darkest moments, Earth's leaders knew that panic or anger could not drive their decisions. Acting impulsively might worsen the situation, or even put Earth itself in danger. They needed a plan, one that could protect their people, honor the survivors of Valora, and make sure the truth of the Council's betrayal was shared across the galaxy. They began by creating a multi-layered strategy, blending diplomacy, intelligence, and defense. Every step had to be carefully calculated. One of the first steps was gathering every possible piece of evidence. Teams of analysts worked day and night to compile transmissions, recordings, and testimonies from survivors. Each detail was checked and verified, ensuring that nothing could be dismissed as rumor or exaggeration. The ambassador, who had been warning Earth about the Council for months before the attacks, oversaw the process personally. Their focus was to make certain that when the time came to confront the Council, Earth would have the full truth on its side. At the same time, Earth's leaders had to make difficult decisions about what to do next. Could they risk sending a fleet into the Council's territory? Could they confront a governing body so powerful and influential without provoking a larger conflict? The answer was not simple. Military experts worked closely with diplomats to create scenarios that would allow Earth to act decisively but carefully. They wanted to ensure that their actions were seen as just, necessary, and protective, not as revenge. Public opinion played an important role as well. Citizens across the planet were anxious, angry, and desperate for information. News networks, social platforms, and community groups became hubs for discussion and support. Families shared stories of their hope for Valora, of the survivors they had seen on broadcasts, and of the small victories in the rescue missions. The message was clear. People wanted action, but they also wanted it to be principled and meaningful. Leaders understood that they had the support of an entire planet, but they also had the responsibility to guide that support wisely. The survivors themselves were at the center of the recovery effort. Temporary shelters were established on Earth and nearby friendly colonies, giving families a safe place to rest, recover, and begin rebuilding. Children who had been separated from their parents were reunited, often in emotional and tearful moments that reminded everyone why the work mattered. Communities formed quickly, helping each other with food, clothing, medical care, and emotional support. Volunteers from Earth contributed wherever they could, whether by delivering supplies, translating messages, or simply listening to those who had experienced the unimaginable. While rescue and relief operations were ongoing, intelligence teams worked tirelessly to learn more about the Council's inner workings. Intercepted transmissions, recovered logs, and testimonies from defecting council employees began to reveal the full extent of the conspiracy. It became clear that a faction within the council had grown fearful of the growing alliance between Earth and Valora. They had believed that a partnership based on trust and cooperation could inspire other planets to seek independence, challenge authority, and question the council's power. In response, they had decided to neutralize the threat in the most extreme way imaginable. The ambassadors spent long hours reviewing this information. They often walked through the temporary shelters for survivors, listening to stories and taking notes, while also preparing reports for Earth's leaders. Every day brought new insight into the Council's plans, their fears, and their ruthless methods. The ambassador knew that confronting the Council would require not only proof, but also a deep understanding of their motives. Without understanding, any action could be misinterpreted or fail. At the same time, military strategists prepared defensive measures. Earth's fleet was placed on high alert, ready to respond if the Council attempted further aggression. They strengthened space stations, upgraded communication networks, and ensured that emergency evacuation plans were in place. Every precaution was taken to protect civilians, survivors, and the planet itself. It was a delicate balance between demonstrating strength and avoiding unnecessary escalation. While all of this planning took place, Earth also focused on morale. Citizens needed to see that hope was not lost. Schools incorporated lessons about resilience, cooperation, and courage. News channels highlighted the bravery of rescue teams and survivors. Communities celebrated small successes, families reunited, children smiling again, and valuable resources recovered. These stories reminded everyone why they were fighting not for revenge, but for justice, compassion, and the future of their alliance with Valora. In parallel, diplomats began reaching out to other planets. Earth knew that the Council's actions had not gone unnoticed, even among neutral worlds. Many planets were shocked, confused, or hesitant to act. By sharing verified evidence, personal testimonies, and detailed reports of the Council's betrayal, Earth aimed to build support for accountability. It was not an easy task. Political alliances were complicated, and fear of retaliation ran deep. Still, every planet that understood the truth became an ally in principle, if not yet in action. As Earth prepared for the next phase, they also considered the survivors' long-term needs. Temporary shelters were not enough. Families needed homes, children needed schools, and communities needed stability. Plans were made for new settlements, both on Earth and in secure nearby colonies. Engineers and urban planners worked to design living spaces that could support hundreds of families, provide safety, and allow for cultural preservation. Valoran traditions and values were respected, ensuring that survivors could maintain their identity while starting anew. The ambassador continued to play a central role in these efforts. They spent hours coordinating between engineers, medics, diplomats, and intelligence officers. They visited shelters regularly, offering words of encouragement and support. They listened to stories of courage, of neighbors helping neighbors, of children finding moments of joy even in hardship. These moments were small, but they reminded everyone why Earth's response had to be principled and human-centered. As Part 4 progressed, a sense of urgency grew. Earth's leaders realized that documenting the truth and preparing for potential confrontation with the Council could not wait. Every day that passed allowed the Council to regroup, plan, and possibly strike again. Yet rushing without care could put more lives in danger. Every decision had to balance speed, accuracy, and safety. Discussions within the leadership circles were intense. Military officers proposed strategies for a potential offensive, while diplomats emphasized communication, negotiation, and transparency. Scientists offered insights into energy detection, fleet coordination, and survival planning. The ambassador reminded everyone of the moral imperative. Their actions must reflect justice, not revenge. Every choice carried consequences, but the guiding principle remained clear: protect survivors, reveal the truth, and prevent further harm. Meanwhile, stories from the survivors continued to inspire courage. Families shared their experiences, highlighting acts of bravery, kindness, and resilience. Children who had faced unimaginable loss still smiled when they found friends among other survivors. Engineers who had lost their laboratories continued to innovate, creating tools and technologies to help others. These stories reminded Earth that the alliance between the two worlds was not just political, it was deeply human. The public response was remarkable. Volunteers across Earth joined relief efforts, sharing resources, skills, and time. Students organized supply drives. Local communities opened their homes to displaced families. Scientists and engineers contributed remotely, offering guidance for rebuilding efforts. The entire planet seemed to rally behind a shared goal, ensuring that the survivors of Valoran were supported and that justice would be pursued. As intelligence continued to reveal the Council's motives, Earth's leaders realized that transparency would be crucial. The truth had to reach the galaxy, not just Earth. They began compiling reports, verified recordings, and testimonies into a comprehensive dossier. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, was included. The goal was simple. No one could deny what had happened, and no one could ignore the need for accountability. Finally, a plan began to take shape. Earth would continue rescue operations, secure the survivors, and provide aid. At the same time, they would prepare for potential confrontation with the Council, armed not only with military readiness, but also with the undeniable truth of their actions. Every step was designed to protect lives, prevent further attacks, and ensure that justice was visible to the entire galaxy. In the final days of Part 4, hope began to grow alongside determination. Earth had seen the worst of betrayal, but they also witnessed the best of humanity: resilience, courage, compassion, and unity. Every survivor helped, every volunteer contributed, and every child who smiled again was a reminder that the alliance between Earth and Valoran was worth protecting. As Earth prepared to face the next challenge, one truth became clear. The coming days would demand courage, wisdom, and compassion in equal measure. The Council had revealed its capacity for destruction, but Earth had also revealed its capacity for unity, strength, and humanity. The story of Valoran was far from over, but the foundation for justice, protection, and resilience had already been laid. The preparation for Earth's next steps was intense. Rescue missions for Valoran's survivors continued without pause, but now a new layer of focus had been added, reaching the Council's territory. Earth's leaders and strategists knew that the Council would not admit to its actions unless it faced undeniable proof and pressure. For decades, the Council had acted with authority and control, but now the evidence of its betrayal was overwhelming, and Earth was determined to make sure it could no longer hide. Every action had to be precise. Earth's fleet, though smaller than the Council's, was highly advanced. Engineers, pilots, and navigators worked tirelessly to coordinate movements, study potential battlefields, and anticipate the Council's possible reactions. Every detail was calculated with care, because even a small mistake could put civilians, survivors, and the planet itself at risk. Earth had learned the hard way that preparation and caution were as important as courage. Communication with the galaxy became a key priority. Earth knew that the Council relied heavily on perception and influence. If other planets understood the truth, they could apply pressure, limit the Council's options, and protect vulnerable worlds. Diplomatic teams worked around the clock to share verified evidence, recordings, and survivor testimonies. Planets that had remained neutral now began to speak up, questioning the Council's actions, and expressing solidarity with Earth and Valora. This growing awareness strengthened Earth's position and encouraged its leaders to act with confidence. The survivors of Valora became central to the preparations. Many had lost everything, but their courage and determination were remarkable. They worked alongside Earth's teams, helping to plan safe evacuation routes, identify risks, and provide first-hand accounts of the Council's tactics. Children and families, despite having experienced unimaginable loss, offered insights that only people who had lived through the attacks could provide. Their involvement reminded everyone that this was not just a political matter. It was deeply human. In temporary shelters and safe zones, life began to stabilize. People worked together, rebuilding communities, sharing food, and supporting one another. Earth's volunteers played a vital role, helping survivors find their place in this new reality. Engineers developed temporary habitats, doctors provided essential care, and educators established learning spaces for children. It was a delicate balance, saving lives while preparing for the larger confrontation ahead. Every day brought small victories, moments of hope that reminded everyone why they were fighting. Meanwhile, intelligence teams continued to uncover the Council's plans. The more they learned, the clearer it became that the Council's leadership had grown complacent, overconfident, and rigid in its thinking. They had assumed that fear, secrecy, and control would prevent any planet from challenging them. But the evidence, the survivor stories, and Earth's careful preparation had shattered that illusion. The Council would now face a force that was not only prepared, but also morally unwavering. Earth's leadership. Meetings were long and intense. Military officers discussed strategies for approaching the Council's outer defenses, while diplomats considered ways to minimize conflict and ensure the truth was broadcast across the galaxy. Scientists provided simulations and data on energy patterns, ship maneuvering, and possible communication intercepts. The ambassador reminded everyone that every action had to balance justice, safety, and principle. No one wanted to escalate into unnecessary violence. The goal was accountability, not revenge. Pilots and crews trained tirelessly. Simulations tested every possible scenario, from navigation through difficult space environments to defensive maneuvers against Council fleets. Each team knew that they were part of something larger than themselves. Their actions would not only protect survivors, but also send a message that courage and truth mattered in a galaxy too often dominated by fear and control. Public engagement also played a role. Citizens across Earth followed the developments closely, supporting relief efforts and sharing stories of survivors. Communities organized supply drives, communication networks helped coordinate volunteers, and schools taught children about courage, cooperation, and resilience. Every act, no matter how small, reinforced the importance of standing together for justice. People understood that the future of their alliance with Valora, and perhaps the safety of other peaceful worlds depended on their determination. As Earth's fleet approached the outer edges of the Council's territory, tension grew. Every sensor scan, every transmission, every movement was carefully analyzed. Pilots could feel the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. They were not simply navigating space, they were carrying hope, evidence, and the will of countless people who had been affected by the Council's betrayal. The mission was as much about human spirit as it was about technology or strategy. When Earth's fleet reached the first Council checkpoints, they did not attack immediately. Instead, they sent clear communications, sharing verified evidence of the Council's actions. Recordings of orders, intercepted transmissions, and survivor testimonies were broadcast directly to the Council and to neighboring planets. The message was clear. The truth would not be hidden, and injustice would not go unchallenged. The Council's response was swift but confused. Some units moved to intercept, while others hesitated, unsure how to respond to evidence that could no longer be denied. Panic spread among the ruling faction. They had relied on secrecy, intimidation, and compliance to maintain control. Now, the galaxy was watching, and their power seemed fragile. Earth's approach had changed the dynamic. The Council could no longer act without scrutiny, and every decision they made would be observed. Neutral planets watched closely. Many were shocked to see the level of organization and moral commitment displayed by Earth. They witnessed not only the fleet's strategic movements, but also the care with which survivors were treated and the transparency of communications. Slowly, voices began to speak out against the Council, questioning the legitimacy of its leadership and expressing solidarity with Earth and Valora. This growing support created additional pressure on the Council, forcing even hesitant members to reconsider their positions. Earth's leaders maintained discipline throughout the operation. They avoided unnecessary confrontations, focused on defensive readiness, and prioritized the protection of survivors. Every action, every communication, every decision was guided by principle rather than anger. This careful approach ensured that the fleet's presence remained a force for accountability rather than destruction. It also reinforced the moral authority Earth held in the eyes of the galaxy. The survivors continued to play an essential role. Those who could travel with the fleet provided real-time reports, offering insights that helped avoid hazards, improve coordination, and maintain morale. Families shared stories with crews, inspiring confidence and resilience. Children, despite having faced trauma, were treated with care, ensuring their needs were met and their spirits remained strong. These human-centered actions were a reminder that even in moments of crisis, compassion could guide decisions more effectively than fear or retaliation. As Earth's fleet moved deeper into the Council's territory, tensions reached a critical point. Council forces attempted to block the path, but Earth's precise planning, advanced technology, and careful coordination allowed the fleet to navigate safely. Communication channels were open, with evidence continually shared to prevent misunderstandings and reduce the risk of unnecessary conflict. Every successful maneuver reinforced the fleet's confidence and demonstrated that principle, preparation, and courage could prevail even against a powerful adversary. At the same time, the ambassador worked tirelessly to maintain diplomatic channels. They reached out to Council members who had shown hesitation, offering opportunities to acknowledge the truth and step aside peacefully. Many were reluctant, but some began to question the decisions of the faction responsible for the attacks. It became clear that even within the Council, fear and overconfidence had created fractures that Earth could leverage through transparency and moral authority. As the fleet approached the Council's central hub, Earth's leaders knew that the next steps would be decisive. The goal was not to destroy, but to expose, to ensure accountability, and to protect the remaining survivors. Every move had to be precise, visible, and principled. Pilots, engineers, and diplomats coordinated seamlessly, balancing readiness for conflict with commitment to safety and evidence-based action. Finally, Earth reached a position from which they could broadcast the full evidence of the Council's betrayal to the entire galaxy. Recordings, intercepted orders, survivor testimonies, and verified analysis were transmitted to planets across multiple systems. Millions of people watched as the truth unfolded, revealing the calculated actions of a faction that had attempted to destroy Valora. Shock, anger, and disbelief spread, but so did support for justice and accountability. The Council's ruling faction faced a moment of reckoning. Their previous sense of control had been shattered. Units hesitated, officials questioned orders, and cracks appeared in the once solid facade of authority. Earth's measured approach, combined with undeniable evidence and transparent communication, created a situation where the Council could no longer act with impunity. Even in this tense and dangerous moment, Earth maintained focus on what mattered most: the survivors. Every shuttle landing, every rescued family, and every safe evacuation was a reminder that the mission was not about power, but about humanity. Acts of compassion, bravery, and resilience guided the fleet's actions. Proving that principle could be stronger than fear or intimidation. As Part 5 draws to a close, Earth had achieved a critical milestone. They had reached the Council's territory, broadcast the truth across the galaxy, and demonstrated both readiness and restraint. Survivors were protected, evidence was undeniable, and support from other planets was growing. The Council had been exposed, and the path toward justice was now clear. The story of Valoran, once defined by tragedy and betrayal, had entered a new phase one of courage, accountability, and human-centered action. The coming days would test Earth's resolve, but the foundation had been laid, a commitment to truth, protection, and compassion that would shape the galaxy's future. The moment Earth had been preparing for had finally arrived. The evidence of the Council's betrayal was broadcast across multiple systems, and the truth was no longer hidden. Every planet, every colony, and every space station now had access to the recordings, the survivor testimonies, and the intercepted orders that revealed the deliberate attacks on Valoran. Shock, anger, and disbelief rippled through the galaxy, but for Earth, this was only the beginning. The focus was now on protecting survivors, holding the Council accountable, and ensuring that justice was done. Earth's fleet maintained a cautious presence near the Council's territory. They had no desire for unnecessary destruction, but they were ready to respond if the Council tried to retaliate. Pilots and crews worked in precise coordination, their training and preparation paying off with every maneuver. Sensors scanned for hidden threats, engineers monitored energy fluctuations, and intelligence teams analyzed every Council movement. Each day was tense, but every day brought the fleet closer to ensuring safety for the survivors and stability for the galaxy. The survivors of Valoran played an important role in this phase as well. Many had witnessed the Council's operations firsthand, and their insights were invaluable. Families who had escaped the attacks helped guide fleet movements, identify hazards, and communicate conditions back to Earth's command. Children, though young, brought their own observations and courage, reminding everyone that resilience often comes in unexpected forms. Every survivor was both a witness to injustice and a participant in recovery efforts. Earth's leadership meetings were long and intense. The ambassador, military strategists, diplomats, and intelligence officers all collaborated closely. They discussed every possible scenario, from the Council's attempts at diplomacy to potential aggressive actions. The goal was always the same: to act with precision, fairness, and humanity. Every decision was weighed for its consequences, ensuring that no action was driven by anger or revenge, but by the need to protect, save, and ensure accountability. Across the galaxy, planets began to respond. Some sent messages of support, pledging resources or personnel to assist with recovery efforts. Others condemned the Council publicly, signaling that its actions were unacceptable and would not go unchallenged. Even neutral planets began to speak out, demanding transparency, fairness, and the protection of peaceful worlds. This growing chorus of voices strengthened Earth's position and made it clear that the Council could no longer act in secret. On Earth, the public remained deeply engaged. Communities continued to support Valoran survivors, contributing food, medicine, shelter, and emotional support. Volunteers helped organize temporary settlements, ensuring that families had safe spaces to recover. Schools, community centers, and local organizations became hubs for learning, healing, and planning for the future. Every effort reinforced the idea that this mission was not just political, it was about humanity, compassion, and resilience. The ambassador continued to be a central figure, traveling between Earth, temporary shelters, and fleet command centers. They listened to survivors' stories, offered guidance to teams, and ensured that every voice was heard. Their presence reminded everyone that leadership was not just about strategy or authority, but also about empathy, understanding, and connection. Small acts, a comforting word, a personal acknowledgement of suffering, a promise kept became symbols of hope and humanity amidst chaos. Meanwhile, intelligence teams uncovered more about the Council's inner workings. Hidden communications, intercepted orders, and defecting officials revealed that fear and overconfidence had driven the betrayal. The ruling faction had assumed that secrecy and intimidation would prevent any challenge. They had miscalculated. Earth's transparency, preparedness, and moral clarity had turned the situation into a moment of accountability, forcing the Council to confront the consequences of its actions. Earth's fleet was now positioned to respond if necessary, but the primary focus remained on protection and documentation. Every ship, every crew, and every resource was dedicated to saving lives, preventing further attacks, and maintaining order. The ambassador emphasized that this was not about retaliation, but about establishing justice and ensuring that no world would be targeted without consequences. Every movement was deliberate, every action purposeful. The survivors' courage continued to inspire. Families shared their experiences, highlighting acts of bravery and resilience. Children who had endured trauma now helped others navigate shelters and temporary settlements. Scientists, engineers, and other professionals who had lost everything still contributed their skills to recovery and planning efforts. Every story reinforced the importance of standing together and acting with principle, proving that humanity could triumph over cruelty and fear. As the Council realized the reach of Earth's communications, cracks appeared in their leadership. Confusion spread among officials, some of whom had not been involved in the attacks, but were now forced to face the consequences. Orders were questioned, strategies hesitated, and dissent grew. Earth had demonstrated that the truth, combined with careful preparation and moral authority, could weaken even a seemingly invincible force. Diplomats continued to engage with Council members who were willing to listen. Some were persuaded to acknowledge the truth and step aside, realizing that further obstruction could only lead to more exposure and loss of credibility. Others resisted, clinging to power, but their options were limited. Earth's combination of transparency, evidence, and moral resolve had created a situation where accountability was unavoidable. At the same time, humanitarian efforts expanded. Temporary settlements became more organized, medical facilities were strengthened, and education programs were implemented for children who had missed months of schooling. Communities rebuilt social structures, held cultural events, and maintained Valoran traditions while integrating support from Earth. These actions reinforced that the mission was not just about exposing the Council, but also about rebuilding lives and restoring hope. Pilots, engineers, and fleet crews remained vigilant. Even as diplomatic progress was made, the threat of unexpected aggression required constant readiness. Training exercises, communication drills, and emergency simulations ensured that every team could respond quickly and effectively. Morale was maintained through encouragement, shared success stories, and the knowledge that their work was saving lives and shaping a more just future. Earth's leaders also focused on long-term security. Plans were made to prevent similar attacks from happening in the future. Satellites and monitoring systems were upgraded, intelligence networks strengthened, and alliances with other planets formalized. The experience with Valoran had revealed vulnerabilities, but it also provided lessons in preparation, coordination, and moral leadership. Earth was determined to ensure that no planet under its protection would ever be left defenseless again. Finally, a pivotal moment arrived. The Council, facing undeniable evidence, public scrutiny, and the unified presence of Earth's fleet, agreed to negotiations. For the first time, those responsible were held accountable in front of witnesses from across the galaxy. Survivor testimonies were presented directly, and the facts of the attacks could not be denied. The moral authority of Earth, combined with careful planning and transparency, had created a situation where justice could be achieved without unnecessary destruction. The negotiations were tense, but ultimately successful. Plans were made to provide reparations for Valora, ensure protection for survivors, and establish oversight mechanisms to prevent future abuses. The ruling faction of the Council was removed from power, and reforms were promised to restore trust across the galaxy. While no words could undo the suffering, the actions taken ensured that the Council could no longer act without accountability. Throughout this period, the ambassador continued to serve as a bridge between Earth, Valora, and the broader galaxy. They ensured that survivors' voices were heard, that communities were supported, and that every decision reflected both principle and compassion. Their leadership reminded everyone that courage and empathy could shape outcomes, even in the face of immense betrayal. As Part 6 draws to a close, Earth had achieved what had once seemed impossible. Valera's survivors were safe, the Council was held accountable, and the truth of the attacks was known across multiple systems. Humanity's principles, compassion, resilience, and justice had prevailed, proving that even the darkest acts of betrayal could be met with courage. Preparation and unity. The story of Valora, once defined by tragedy and loss, had entered a new chapter, one of rebuilding, accountability, and hope. Families reunited, children learned, and communities thrived. Earth's actions had not only saved lives, but had also set a precedent for the galaxy. Truth, courage, and humanity could never be silenced. The coming days would continue to test the survivors, the leaders, and the galaxy as a whole. But one truth was clear: the bond between Earth and Valora, forged through shared struggle and reinforced by acts of courage and compassion, would endure. And in that bond lay the promise that no betrayal, no matter how calculated or cruel, could ever extinguish hope, justice, and humanity.